Great article here from David Dayen of The Intercept. Democrats who voted to deregulate Wall Street got wiped out in a setback for bank lobbyists. The most high-profile bipartisan legislation of the Trump era turned out to be electoral poison, or at least not a prophylactic, for the Senate Democrats who decided to support it, which could serve as a lesson for party leaders wishing to join with the president on other bills next year. The Crapo bill, so aptly named, a bank deregulation measure co-authored by Senate Banking Committee Chair Mike Crapo, Republican of Idaho, and several centrist Democrats, passed Congress this spring with the help of 17 members of the Senate Democratic Caucus and 33 House Democrats. In the 10 states where Donald Trump won in 2016 and Democratic senators stood for re-election this year, the 3 who opposed the Crapo bill all won a greater share of votes in their states than the 7 who voted for it. Senators voting no averaged 54.7% of the vote and won by 10 percentage points, while the yes votes averaged 48.1% and lost by 1.5 points. The only Republican who lost, Dean Heller of Nevada, I always fuck up with that, also voted for the Crapo bill and fell by 5 points to Jackie Rosen, who voted against the legislation in the House. The Crapo bill rolled back a number of elements of the Dodd-Frank Act, including, in particular, stiffer regulations on banks that have between $50 billion and $250 billion in assets. A recent proposal from the Federal Reserve, using authority granted by the Crapo bill, expands that deregulation up to banks with as much as $700 billion in assets. Senate Democratic supporters justified their votes by casting the legislation as a tweak to benefit community banks in small towns and rural areas, despite its greatest impact occurring well up the chain. In fact, the bill has already led to accelerated consolidation and further disappearance of community banks. In reality, the Democrats' rationale was likely more cynical. They thought supporting the bill would unlock campaign contributions from the financial industry, and they were right. So this is amazing because it shows you a bunch of different dynamics at play here. But the mainstream media started fawning over this bill from the very beginning, and they portrayed it from that bipartisan lens, that bipartisan perspective, where they have this lazy belief in mainstream media that anything that's bipartisan is by definition wonderful. Now, the reality is nothing could be further from the truth. Usually when there's bipartisan agreement, run for the hills. You know what else had bipartisan agreement? The Iraq War. An illegal offensive war against a country that didn't attack us, that wound up costing $7 trillion and killed minimum 200,000 civilians and thousands of our own troops. Brought about torture as well. Like, all these things are all bipartisan. So the fact that they rolled out this bipartisan deregulation bill, the media was, oh my God, they're working together like adults. This is what people want to see in the rest of the country. No, they don't. The American people don't want to see all of their elected officials sell them out so that they can get more Wall Street cash in their upcoming re-election campaign. That's not what they want to see at all. They want to see people fight for them. So even with the media fawning over this bipartisan bill, what happened? By and large, the people who supported it got obliterated, and the people who opposed it won comfortably in their re-election campaigns. Now, that's not the only issue here. There's a causation-correlation problem, obviously. But as a general rule, the Democrats who supported this Wall Street deregulation, they're the blue dog Democrats, the so-called moderate Democrats, the centrists. Like Joe Donnelly ran very right-wing in his campaign. He even said he's in favor of the wall, and he was shitting on socialized medicine, also known as Medicare for All. So they got obliterated, and they got obliterated because they're Democrats who spit in the face of their base, and they don't make their own argument. They say, I'm like the Republicans, and aren't the Republicans wonderful? The only one who consistently bucks this trend and somehow always gets away with it is Joe Manchin, and I'm not kidding when I say he's a magician, and I'm legitimately impressed by the fact that he's the only person who can keep doing this and get away with it. Everybody else gets destroyed when they do it. So even with the media biasing all the coverage to act like this bill was awesome, and by the way, that's going to cause another giant crash, economic crash, and it's going to happen very soon, okay? Like, that is going to cause horrendous damage, and the media, instead of giving you the information about, hey, what happened in American history the last time we did stuff like this, they don't tell you that. They just act like it's bipartisan, so it is by definition wonderful. Why not do some fucking research and look at history and look at economics and look at what happens when this is the policy that's implemented every time there's a boom-bust cycle. So everything takes off and everything looks great, and then everything crashes. So it's going to happen again. So the media covered it like it was great, but still the people were like, no, fuck these guys, and they voted him out. So it's almost like the wisdom of the people even sometimes overrides how shitty the media is. You know, it's like when Bernie somehow managed to win 22 states and 47% of the vote with the DNC rigging it against him and with the media shitting on him all day long, because there's something about the people they can sniff the bullshit from a mile away. So like, I don't know, fuck this. Why are you praising Joe Donnelly? That seems like a bad idea. So it's amazing that we were able to override the bias of the mainstream media in this case. But then also, listen, the real reason they did it, it's not for ideological, like, it's not like they really have a philosophy like Joe Donnelly's like, you know, I've looked at all the evidence. I've read about Austrian economics and Keynesian economics and modern monetary theory, and I have to say, the Austrians make a more powerful case. They're not fucking intellectuals. You know what he is? He's a corrupt, money-hungry politician. So he thought, hey, if I vote for the deregulation on Wall Street, I have a tough re-election coming up. I will be able to raise more money, and henceforth I will be able to win if I sell out to Wall Street. Now, that's actually not an irrational thing to believe, like, oh, if I raise more, I'm better off, because the majority of the time that's true. But it's a different political age. And now we just need, the people who are actually on the left just need to get within striking distance, and then we can win. Like, if you just give us a 2-to-1 disadvantage, we could do it. But it's hard to do it with a 10-to-1 disadvantage. So they really thought like, oh, I'll get the money and then I'll be good. But all the money in the world couldn't save your ass in the same way that all the money in the world couldn't save Hillary Clinton's ass. Because it's just, when you give people the option of Republican or Republican light, they choose Republican. And then when you give people the option of Democratic or Republican, they pick Democrat. So it's like back when Howard Dean was on the left and he said, I'm from the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. That's what we're trying to tell the Democrats to do now. Be on the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. But there you have it. They voted for Wall Street deregulation. It was a cynical move to get more money. They still got wiped out, even with the positive media coverage and raising the extra money. So it's almost like running to the right is a terrible idea. Meanwhile, Sherrod Brown, Democratic senator, the state over next to Indiana in Ohio, he got reelected, won by 8 points. Joe Donnelly got his ass beat by 8 points. Yeah, it's almost like if you stand for something, it might be good from a politics perspective and a policy perspective.